You were supposed to drown with that bastard child. The words exploded across the living room of our Victoria Island penthouse like a grenade, and I watched my husband, no, the monster wearing Emeka's face, stumble backward, his champagne glass shattering against the marble floor. 4 years. For years I'd been dead to him. 4 years he'd been living in this glass tower, celebrating his freedom, his new wife, his perfect life built on my grave. But the dead don't stay buried when they have unfinished business. "Hello, Emeka," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. "Surprised to see me? Welcome to Stories by Tino. Thank you so much for being here and for all your incredible support. Your comments, likes, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's story, please drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now, let's get into this powerful story of betrayal, survival, and the revenge that shook an entire family to its core. I still remember that night like it was branded into my soul. August 15th, 2020. The yacht party off the coast of Lagos. The warm breeze carrying the scent of salt and expensive perfume. Emeka's hand on the small of my back, the same hand that had cradled my growing belly just hours before, guiding me toward the railing with a tenderness that made me smile. I was 6 months pregnant with our first child. We'd been married for 3 years, and I thought we were happy. I thought the surprise yacht trip was his way of celebrating the baby news with our closest friends. I was such a fool. "Come look at the sunset, Adunni," he'd whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "It's beautiful." I'd leaned over the railing, one hand protecting my stomach, the other shielding my eyes from the orange glow bleeding across the horizon. That's when I felt it. Both his hands on my back, but not gentle anymore. Hard. Violent. Pushing. The last thing I heard before I hit the water was his voice, cold and empty. "I'm sorry, but you were never part of the plan." The Atlantic Ocean swallowed me whole. The impact knocked the air from my lungs, and the weight of my body, heavy with pregnancy, pulled me down into the darkness. I should have died. By every law of nature and logic, I should have drowned in those black waters with my unborn child. But God, or fate, or whatever force governs the universe, had other plans. A fishing boat. A crew of kind strangers who pulled my half-dead body from the sea. A small hospital in a coastal town called Badagry where a miracle doctor saved both my life and my daughter's. 3 months of recovery where I had nothing but time to piece together the truth. My husband had tried to murder me. And he'd almost succeeded. When I was strong enough to think clearly, I hired a private investigator. What he uncovered shattered what remained of my naive heart. Emeka hadn't acted alone. His mistress, Zainab, my former best friend, had been pregnant too. They'd planned my death together so they could be free to marry, to raise their child without the inconvenience of a wife who actually loved him. The investigator showed me photos, Emeka and Zainab at my funeral, her belly round under a black dress, his arm around her waist. Their wedding, just 2 months after I drowned. Their son's birth. Their perfect life in my penthouse, sleeping in my bed, spending my family's money. My father had been a successful businessman before he died, and he'd left everything to me. The real estate empire, the investment portfolio, the offshore accounts. When I died, it all transferred to my husband as my sole heir. Emeka hadn't just killed me for love. He'd killed me for $50 million. But here's what he didn't know. I was smarter than he ever gave me credit for. Before I died, I'd been suspicious. Little things, hushed phone calls, unexplained absences, the smell of Zainab's perfume on his shirts. I'd hired a forensic accountant to audit our finances, and I'd created a secret backup of every document, every transaction, every dirty secret buried in our marriage. That evidence sat in a safety deposit box in Abuja, waiting for the day I was strong enough to use it. And today was that day. Now, standing in the penthouse living room that used to be mine, watching Emeka's face drain of color, I felt a savage satisfaction bloom in my chest. His new wife, my former best friend, stood frozen by the dining table, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. How is this possible?" Emeka stammered, his voice cracking. "You're dead." We buried you. We had a funeral. This isn't real. Oh, it's very real, I said, taking a step closer. I was wearing a red dress, his favorite color, and my daughter's hand was tucked safely in mine. She was 3 years old now, with his eyes and my determination, and she was my greatest weapon. Say hello to your daughter, Emeka. The one you tried to kill. My little girl, Kayamika, I'd named her, meaning God is beautiful, because only God could have saved us, stared at the man who was supposed to be her father with curious, innocent eyes. Mama, is that him? She asked, her small voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Is that the bad man? Zainab made a choking sound and collapsed into a chair. Emeka's face twisted between rage and fear, settling somewhere in between that made him look like a stranger. What do you want? He hissed. Money. Is that what this is about? Fine. Name your price and disappear again. I laughed, and it echoed off the high ceilings like broken glass. Money. You think I want money? Emeka, I have something much more valuable than money. I have the truth. And I have evidence. The color drained from his face completely now. Evidence. Bank records. Emails. Text messages between you and Zainab planning my murder. Photos of you sabotaging the yacht's safety equipment. Voice recordings of you talking to your lawyer about how to inherit my father's estate. 4 years' worth of financial fraud and embezzlement. And most importantly, I pulled out my phone and held it up so he could see the screen. A sworn affidavit from the boat captain you paid off to look the other way while you pushed me overboard. He's terminally ill now, and his conscience got the better of him. He's willing to testify. The silence that followed was deafening. Zainab started to cry, ugly, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Emeka's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, I thought he might lunge at me. But he didn't. He couldn't. Because we both knew I wasn't alone. I've already filed a police report, I continued, my voice sharp and clear. And I've contacted every major newspaper in Lagos. Your arrest warrant will be issued within the hour. The press conference is scheduled for 6 p.m. The entire city will know what you did by morning. You can't do this, Emeka said, but his voice was weak, desperate. Please, Adunni. We can work this out. I'll give you everything back. The house, the money, all of it. Just don't do this. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but contempt. This was the man I'd loved? The man I'd trusted with my life? He was pathetic. The police arrived at Emeka's penthouse exactly 47 minutes after I left. I watched from my car parked across the street, Kayamika asleep in her car seat behind me, as 2 police vehicles pulled up to the building's entrance. The flashing blue and red lights painted the glass tower in colors of justice, and I felt my heart hammer against my ribs like it was trying to escape. This was real. This was actually happening. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer, Colonel. Warrant executed. They're bringing him in now. Meet me at the station in 1 hour. I typed back a single word, coming. But I didn't move yet. I needed to see this. I needed to watch Emeka be led out in handcuffs, to witness the moment his perfect life came crashing down around him. Call it petty, call it cruel, I called it justice. 20 minutes later, the doors opened, and there he was. Emeka Okonkwo, billionaire real estate developer, philanthropist, family man, walking out of his luxury building with his hands cuffed behind his back. His face was a mask of rage and humiliation as reporters, already gathered like vultures who'd smelled blood, surged forward with cameras and microphones. Mr. Okonkwo, is it true you murdered your first wife? Did you push Adunni Okonkwo into the ocean while she was pregnant? How do you respond to allegations of fraud and embezzlement? Zainab followed moments later, also in handcuffs, her face streaked with mascara and tears. She'd worn my jewelry to her own arrest, the diamond necklace my father gave me on my wedding day. The irony was almost poetic. I started the car and drove away before anyone could spot me. I'd given the press enough ammunition for tonight. Tomorrow, I'd hold my own press conference and tell my story to the world. But tonight, I needed to get my daughter home and safe. The apartment I'd rented in Lekki was small compared to the penthouse I used to call home, but it was ours. Every piece of furniture, every photograph on the wall, every toy scattered across the living room floor belonged to the life Kayamika and I had built together. No blood money. No stolen dreams. Just honest work and determination. After I'd recovered from the drowning, I'd started over from nothing. I couldn't access my inheritance without revealing I was alive, and I wasn't ready for that yet. So I'd worked 3 jobs at first: cleaning houses, tutoring children, selling handmade jewelry at local markets. I'd saved every naira, lived in a single room, and rebuilt myself piece by piece. But I'd also been planning, researching, gathering evidence, building my case brick by brick until it was ironclad and unbreakable. Now, as I tucked Kayamika into bed and kissed her forehead, I allowed myself a moment of pride. We'd survived. More than that, we'd won. Mama. Kayamika's sleepy voice called out as I reached the door. Yes, baby. Is the bad man going to hurt us? My heart clenched. She was too young to understand everything, but she'd sensed the danger, the darkness that surrounded her father. I tried to shield her from it, but children always know more than we think. No, sweetheart, I said, returning to sit on the edge of her bed. The bad man can't hurt us anymore. The police are going to make sure of it. Promise. I promise. She smiled, satisfied, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing evened out into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. I wished I could find that same peace. But my mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow, to the press conference, to the trial that would follow. This was just the beginning. At the police station, Kunal was waiting for me in a private conference room, his briefcase open and documents spread across the table like battle plans. Kunal Adebayo was the best criminal attorney in Lagos, and he'd taken my case pro bono after hearing my story. He was in his 50s, with grey threading through his hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. More importantly, he believed me when everyone else would have called me crazy. They're processing him now, Kunal said as I sat down. Zainab is in a separate holding cell. Both have lawyered up, of course. Emeka hired Femi Bakare. I sucked in a breath. Femi Bakare was notorious, expensive, ruthless, and very good at getting guilty people acquitted. Can he beat us? I asked. Kunal smiled grimly. Not with what we have. The boat captain's testimony alone is damning. Add in the financial records, the text messages, the emails planning your death. Adunni, this case is airtight. Bakare will try to negotiate a plea deal, but we're not accepting anything less than full prosecution. Good, I said. I want him to face every single charge. Attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, all of it. He will. Kunal leaned back in his chair, studying me. How are you holding up? This can't be easy. Easy. Nothing about the last 4 years had been easy. Not the drowning, not the recovery, not raising a child alone while planning my husband's downfall. But I'd survived worse than discomfort. I'm fine, I said. What's next? Tomorrow morning, we hold the press conference. I've already contacted the major networks, NTA, channels, TVC, they'll all be there. You'll tell your story, show your face, and let Nigeria see that you're alive. Then we let the court of public opinion do its work while we prepare for trial. And my inheritance? My father's estate. That's more complicated, Kunal admitted. Legally, everything transferred to Emeka when you were declared dead. We'll need to petition the court to reverse the death certificate and restore your legal status. Then we can file claims to recover the assets. It will take time, months, maybe years. I've waited 4 years, I said. I can wait a little longer. As long as he doesn't get to keep what he stole. He won't. I promise you that. We worked through the details for another hour, the press conference talking points, the timeline for the trial, the witness list we'd need to prepare. By the time I left the station, it was past midnight, and exhaustion was pulling at my bones. But I couldn't sleep yet. There was one more thing I needed to do. The cemetery was closed, but I knew how to get in. I'd been here before, during my recovery, standing in the shadows and staring at my own grave. Adunni Okonkwo, beloved wife and daughter. 1990 to 2020. Gone too soon. The headstone was expensive, white marble with gold lettering, and I wondered if Emeka had felt even a flicker of guilt when he'd chosen it. Probably not. He'd probably been too busy planning his wedding to Zainab to care. I knelt in front of the grave and placed a single white rose on the stone. "I'm back," I whispered to the ghost of the woman I used to be. "And I'm going to make them pay for what they did to us." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and for a moment, I could have sworn I heard my father's voice. Make them remember your name, Adunni. Make them regret ever underestimating you. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and walked back to my car with my head held high. Tomorrow, the whole world would know my name. Tomorrow, Emeka's nightmare would truly begin. I arrived home to find a black SUV parked outside my apartment building. My blood went cold. Had Emeka sent someone? Had I miscalculated? But then the driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out, tall, elegant, with silver-streaked hair and a face I recognized instantly. "Mama." I breathed. Ngozi Okonkwo, Emeka's mother, stood before me like a ghost from another life. The last time I'd seen her was at my wedding, where she'd held my hands and called me the daughter she'd always wanted. "Adunni," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Is it really you?" I didn't answer. I just stared, my mind racing. What was she doing here? Did she know what her son had done? Was she here to threaten me, to protect him? "I know what he did," she said, as if reading my mind. Tears streamed down her face, catching the streetlight. "I know everything. And I'm so sorry." Something inside me cracked. I'd prepared for Emeka's rage, for Zainab's excuses, for lawyers and judges and hostile reporters. But I hadn't prepared for this, for his mother's grief, for her apology. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I need you to know that I will testify against him," Ngozi said. "I will tell the court everything I know about his relationship with Zainab, about the suspicious circumstances of your death, about the money he stole from your father's estate. He is my son, and I love him. But what he did is unforgivable." I felt tears burn behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not until this was truly over. "Thank you," I managed. Ngozi reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "You were always stronger than he deserved. I'm glad you survived, Adunni. I'm glad you came back." She released my hand and returned to her car, driving away into the night and leaving me standing alone on the empty street. I looked up at the window of my apartment, where a single light burned in Kayamika's bedroom. My daughter. My reason for living. My proof that love could survive even the darkest betrayal. Tomorrow, I would face the cameras. Tomorrow, I would tell my story. Tomorrow, the war would begin in earnest. But tonight, I was just a mother coming home to her child. And that was enough. If Emeka's own mother is willing to testify against him, you know this is about to get explosive. Hit that like button if you can't wait to see what happens at the press conference, and drop a comment telling us, would you forgive someone who tried to kill you? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on those notifications because next chapter is going to shake everything up. What do you think happens next? Comment below. The press conference room at the Civic Center was packed with journalists, cameras, and curious onlookers who'd heard whispers of the story that was about to break Lagos wide open. I stood backstage with Kunal, my hands trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. I'd rehearsed what I would say 100 times, but now that the moment had arrived, my throat felt tight and my voice seemed to have abandoned me. You don't have to do this, Kunal said gently, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. We can release a written statement instead. No, I said, forcing steel into my voice. They need to see my face. They need to hear my story from me. Otherwise, Emeka's lawyers will spin this into something it's not. Colonel nodded, understanding. Then let's show them who Adunni Okonkwo really is. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked onto the stage. The camera flashes were blinding, and the murmur of voices swelled into a roar of questions shouted all at once. I took my seat behind the microphone, Colonel beside me, and waited for the room to quiet. When silence finally fell, I began to speak. My name is Adunni Okonkwo, I said, my voice steady now, amplified through the speakers. 4 years ago, my husband, Emeka Okonkwo, pushed me off a yacht into the Atlantic Ocean while I was 6 months pregnant with his child. He did this because he wanted to marry his mistress, my former best friend, Zainab Bello, and inherit my father's $50 million estate. I was supposed to die that night. But I didn't. You could have heard a pin drop. Every eye in the room was fixed on me, every phone and camera recording my words for posterity. I told them everything. The yacht party. The push. The cold water closing over my head. The fishing boat that saved me. The hospital in Badagry where I'd given birth to my daughter 3 months later. The investigation I'd conducted from the shadows. The evidence I'd gathered. The 4 years of planning that had led to this moment. Emeka Okonkwo is not the man he pretends to be, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. He is a murderer. A thief. A liar who built his empire on my father's blood and my supposed corpse. And today, I am here to take back everything he stole. My life, my dignity, and my inheritance. The questions erupted like fireworks. Mrs. Okonkwo, why did you wait 4 years to come forward? Do you have proof of these allegations? What about your daughter? Does Emeka know about her? Are you seeking custody of his son with Zainab? I answered them all, one by one, with Colonel occasionally stepping in to clarify legal details. I showed them copies of the evidence, bank statements, emails, text messages. I played the audio recording of the boat captain's confession. I held up a photograph of myself in the hospital bed, barely alive, with medical reports documenting my injuries. By the time the press conference ended 90 minutes later, social media was already exploding. Within hours, I was trending across every platform. Hashtag Justice for Adunni. Hashtag Emeka the Monster. Hashtag Adunni Returns. My story was being shared, dissected, debated by millions of Nigerians who couldn't believe what they were hearing. The public reaction was swift and brutal, toward Emeka. His business partners began issuing statements distancing themselves from him. His charitable foundation's board voted to remove his name from the organization. Banks froze his accounts pending investigation. His face was plastered on every news channel with the words, "alleged murderer," beneath it. Zainab's family released a statement claiming they'd had no knowledge of the affair or the murder plot, and they were deeply ashamed and heartbroken by her actions. Her younger sister went on Instagram Live crying, begging for forgiveness on behalf of their family. But it was Emeka's mother's testimony that truly destroyed him. 2 days after the press conference, Ngozi Okonkwo gave an interview to Channels TV that aired during prime time. I watched it from my apartment, Kayamaka playing with her dolls on the floor beside me. The interviewer, a sharp-eyed woman named Ifeoma, leaned forward with barely contained excitement. Mrs. Okonkwo, your son has been arrested for the attempted murder of his wife. What do you have to say about these allegations? Ngozi looked older than I remembered, grief etched into every line of her face. My son is guilty, she said simply. I know this because he confessed to me. The studio audience gasped. Even the interviewer looked stunned. He confessed. When? 3 years ago, Ngozi said, her voice breaking. He came to me drunk one night, crying, saying he'd made a terrible mistake. He told me everything, how he and Zainab had planned Adunni's death, how they'd paid off the boat captain, how they'd sabotaged the yacht safety equipment to make it look like an accident. He begged me to help him cover it up, to use my connections to make sure no one investigated too closely. And did you? Ngozi closed her eyes. To my eternal shame, yes. I helped him. I called people in the police force, in the Coast Guard. I made sure the investigation was cursory at best. I told myself I was protecting my son, protecting our family name. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. Why are you coming forward now? Because Adunni survived, Ngozi said, opening her eyes and looking directly into the camera. Because she came back, and she deserves justice. And because I can't live with this guilt anymore. My son is a murderer, and I helped him get away with it. That makes me complicit. So I'm here to tell the truth, no matter the cost. The interview continued for another 30 minutes, with Ngozi providing details that corroborated everything I'd said. By the time it ended, #Ngozi's confession was trending worldwide. I turned off the TV and sat in silence for a long moment. Kayamika looked up at me. Mama, why are you crying? I hadn't realized I was. I wiped my eyes and pulled my daughter into my arms. Because sometimes people do the right thing, baby girl. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs them everything. The next morning, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Hello. Adunni. The voice was hoarse, desperate. Emeka's voice. Please. Please, we need to talk. My blood went cold. How did you get this number? That doesn't matter. Listen to me. I know what I did was wrong. I know I can never make it right. But please, for the sake of our children, can we meet? Just once. Just to talk. Every instinct screamed at me to hang up. But curiosity, and maybe a small dark part of me that wanted to hear him beg, kept me on the line. What could you possibly have to say to me? I can give you everything, he said quickly. The penthouse, the businesses, every naira I have. I'll sign over full custody of Ifeanyi, my son, to you if you want. I'll plead guilty to everything. Just please, ask the prosecutor to recommend a lighter sentence. 10 years instead of life. That's all I'm asking. I laughed, bitter and cold. You tried to kill me and our unborn child, and you want me to help you get a lighter sentence? You must think I'm still the naive girl who loved you once. Adunni, please. No, I said firmly. You made your choice 4 years ago when you pushed me into the ocean. Now you get to live with the consequences. Enjoy your trial, Emeka. I'll be there every single day, watching you squirm. I hung up before he could respond and immediately blocked the number. But his call had unsettled me. Emeka was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. I needed to be careful. For Kayamika's sake, I couldn't let my guard down now. That evening, Kunal called with news. The prosecution is moving forward with all charges: attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. With Ngozi's testimony and the boat captain's statement, they're confident they can get a conviction. The trial is set to begin in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I repeated. It felt like an eternity and no time at all. There's something else, Kunal said, his tone shifting. Zainab's lawyer reached out. She wants to make a deal, testify against Emeka in exchange for a reduced sentence. My stomach twisted. And the prosecutor is considering it. Her testimony could guarantee a conviction for Emeka, but it means she might only serve 5 to 7 years instead of 20. No, I said immediately. She was part of this. She helped him plan my murder. She doesn't get to walk away with a slap on the wrist. I understand how you feel, but... No buts, Kunal. She doesn't get mercy. Not from me. Not ever. There was a long pause. I'll relay your position to the prosecutor. But ultimately, it's their decision, not ours. I knew he was right, but it didn't make me feel any better. Zainab had betrayed me in the worst way possible. She'd stolen my husband, helped murder me, and moved into my life like I'd never existed. If she got away with a light sentence, where was the justice in that? Late that night, unable to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the evidence one more time. Bank statements, emails, text messages, the boat captain's affidavit, Ngozi's interview transcript. Everything was there. Everything pointed to Emeka's guilt. The case was airtight. So why did I feel like something was wrong? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk, you think you've won. But you have no idea what's coming. Watch your back, Adunni. Asterisk. My heart stopped. I stared at the message, reading it over and over, trying to understand who could have sent it. Emeka was in jail. Zainab was in jail. Who else could be threatening me? Another text arrived. The truth is more complicated than you know. Check your daughter's birth certificate. My hands were shaking as I rushed to my bedroom and pulled out Kayamika's documents from the safe. I'd looked at her birth certificate 100 times. What could possibly be wrong with it? But as I studied it under the lamplight, I saw something I'd never noticed before. A small notation in the corner. Barely visible. A medical code. I grabbed my laptop and searched for what it meant. When the results loaded, the room spun around me. The code indicated a mandatory paternity test had been performed at birth. And according to the notation, there had been a discrepancy. No. No, no, no. I called the hospital in Badagry, my voice frantic. I need to speak to Dr. Musa. It's urgent. It's about my daughter's birth records. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor's tired voice came on the line. Mrs. Okonkwo, is everything all right? The paternity notation on my daughter's birth certificate. What does it mean? There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Dr. Musa, please. I need to know. He sighed. When we performed the emergency cesarean, we ran standard genetic tests. The results showed. Mrs. Okonkwo, I'm sorry, but Emeka Okonkwo is not your daughter's biological father. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the table. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd built my revenge on, suddenly felt like it was collapsing beneath me. If Emeka wasn't Kayamika's father, then whose child was she? And more importantly, did Emeka know? Wait, what? Did not see that coming. If you're as shocked as we are, smash that like button and drop a comment with your theories. Who is Kayamika's real father? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because coming chapter is going to turn this entire story upside down. What do you think this means for Adunni's revenge? Comment below. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table until dawn broke over Lagos, staring at Kayamika's birth certificate like it might suddenly reveal answers I desperately needed. The medical notation stared back at me, small and damning. PTNEGREQ FU. Paternity test. Negative. Require follow-up. My mind raced through every possibility, every memory, every moment from 4 years ago. I'd been faithful to Emeka. I'd never even looked at another man during our marriage. So how was this possible? Unless... My stomach dropped as a memory surfaced, hazy and fragmented. 6 months before the yacht party. The charity gala at the Eco Hotel. I'd felt sick that night, dizzy and disoriented after just 1 glass of wine. Emeka had taken me upstairs to rest in one of the hotel suites. And then... nothing. I remembered nothing after that until I woke up the next morning in our own bed at home, with a pounding headache and Emeka acting strangely solicitous, bringing me breakfast and pain medication. Just a stomach bug, he'd said. You'll feel better soon. 2 weeks later, I'd discovered I was pregnant. Oh God. My hands started shaking so violently that I had to put down the certificate. The implications were too horrifying to process. Had Emeka drugged me? Had someone assaulted me while I was unconscious? Was that why he'd tried to kill me, not because of Zainab, but because he knew the baby wasn't his? I needed answers. And there was only one person who might have them. Dr. Musa agreed to meet me at his office in Baidagri that afternoon. The drive took 2 hours, and I left Kayamaka with my neighbor, a kind grandmother named Mama Ifioma who become like family to us. The hospital was small but clean, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood far from the chaos of Lagos proper. Dr. Musa met me in his office, a cramped space filled with medical journals and family photographs. He was in his 60s, with kind eyes and silver hair, and he'd saved my life when I'd washed up half dead on his operating table 4 years ago. "Mrs. Okonkwo," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "I've been expecting this conversation for a long time." "You knew?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You knew Emeka wasn't her father, and you didn't tell me?" "I tried," he said gently. "When you were recovering, I mentioned that there were some irregularities in the test results and that we should discuss them. But you were so traumatized, so focused on survival, that you told me you didn't want to hear anything that wasn't immediately medically necessary. You said you'd follow up later, and then you disappeared before we could have that conversation." I closed my eyes, remembering those dark days. He was right. I'd been barely functional, overwhelmed by physical pain and emotional devastation. I'd pushed away anything that wasn't about keeping myself and my baby alive. "Tell me everything now," I said. "I need to know." Dr. Musa pulled out a thick medical file and opened it on his desk. "When we performed the emergency cesarean, we ran a full genetic panel on your daughter as a precaution, given the circumstances of her birth. The results showed that while you are definitely her biological mother, the paternal DNA did not match Emeka Okonkwo's profile." "How did you have Emeka's DNA profile?" "We didn't initially. But when the police investigated your disappearance, brief as that investigation was, they collected DNA samples from family members, including your husband. Those samples were in the national database. When our test results came back, I was legally required to run a comparison check for the missing person case. That's when the discrepancy appeared." My mouth felt dry. "Did you report this to anyone?" "I reported it to the detective handling your case, but—" He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "The investigation was shut down very quickly. I was told to seal the records and not discuss them with anyone. At the time, I assumed it was standard procedure for a closed case. But now, knowing what you've revealed about your husband's connections—" "Someone buried it," I finished. "Probably Ngozi, using her influence to make sure nothing complicated the story that I'd simply drowned." "I'm afraid so." I took a shaky breath. "Dr. Musa, is there any way to find out who the biological father is?" He hesitated. "The DNA profile we have is in our system. If you can provide DNA samples from potential candidates, we can run comparison tests. But Mrs. Okonkwo, I have to ask, do you have any idea who it could be?" That was the question that had been tearing me apart all morning. I'd been faithful to Emeka. I'd never been with anyone else. Which meant that if I'd gotten pregnant by another man, it hadn't been consensual. "I think I was drugged and assaulted," I said quietly. 6 months before the yacht incident. At a charity gala. I don't remember anything from that night. Dr. Musa's face darkened with anger and sympathy. "I'm so sorry. If you want to pursue that angle, we should involve the police." "No," I said quickly. "Not yet. Not until I understand what happened. The trial is in 6 weeks, and I can't let this derail the case against Emeka. He still tried to murder me. He still stole my inheritance. That hasn't changed. But if he knew the baby wasn't his, then it gives him a motive for murder," I said, "which actually strengthens my case. But I need to be careful about how this information comes out. If his lawyers get hold of it first, they'll use it to paint me as an unfaithful wife who deserved what happened to her." Dr. Musa nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "A copy of all the test results. And your discretion, at least for now." "You have both," he promised, sliding a folder across the desk to me. "But Adunni, be careful. If someone went to this much trouble to cover up the truth 4 years ago, They might not want it exposed now. On the drive back to Lagos, my phone rang. "Colonel, we have a problem," he said without preamble. "Emeka's lawyers filed a motion this morning demanding a paternity test for Kayamaka." My heart stopped. What? They're claiming that if Emeka isn't her biological father, it undermines your entire case. They're arguing that you were having an affair, that you lied to Emeka about the paternity, and that his actions were a response to your betrayal rather than premeditated murder. "That's insane," I shouted, nearly swerving off the road. I was 6 months pregnant when he pushed me into the ocean. Even if the baby wasn't his, which I never knew, that doesn't justify attempted murder. I know, and the judge will likely see it that way too. But they're trying to muddy the waters, create reasonable doubt. If they can make you look like the villain, they can get Emeka sympathy from the jury. Can they force the paternity test? Yes. The judge granted their motion. You have 1 week to provide a DNA sample from Kayamaka, or they'll petition to have your case dismissed on grounds of fraud. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Let them have their test. The results won't change what Emeka did. "Adunni," Colonel said carefully, "is there something you're not telling me?" I hesitated. Could I trust him with this? If the information leaked, it could destroy everything. But I couldn't fight this battle alone. "Meet me at my apartment tonight," I said. "We need to talk." 3 hours later, Colonel sat on my couch, reading through Dr. Musa's file with an increasingly grim expression. "This changes everything," he said finally. "It doesn't change the fact that Emeka tried to kill me." "No, but it changes the story. It changes public perception. It changes." He stopped, studying me closely. "Do you have any idea who the father might be?" "I think I was drugged and assaulted at a charity gala 6 months before the yacht incident," I said. "But I don't remember anything. I don't know who did it, or if Emeka knew about it, or if that's why he tried to kill me." Colonel was quiet for a long moment. "We need to find out. Because if Emeka knew you'd been assaulted and still chose to murder you rather than support you, that makes him even more monstrous. But if he didn't know, and he discovered the baby wasn't his and reacted violently, his lawyers will argue temporary insanity, crime of passion, reduced sentence. So what do? We investigate. That charity gala. Do you remember who was there? Who organized it? What foundation it was for?" I closed my eyes, trying to pull up details from that blurry night. It was for the Children's Education Foundation. Emeka and I were major donors. There were maybe 200 people there. Businessmen, politicians, society wives. It was at the Eco Hotel, in the Grand Ballroom. Security cameras? Maybe, but the footage would be long gone by now. Colonel stood and began pacing. "What about the hotel suite? You said Emeka took you upstairs to rest. Do you remember the room number?" "No. I barely remember getting there." "Who else knew you weren't feeling well that night? Who saw Emeka take you upstairs?" I thought hard. Zainab. She was there. She made a comment about me not being able to hold my liquor. A cold realization washed over me. Oh my God. She was already his mistress by then. What if she was in on it? What if she drugged me? Why would she drug you? I don't know. Maybe to humiliate me? To make me look bad in front of Emeka's business associates. Even as I said it, I knew it didn't make sense. There had to be more to it. Colonel stopped pacing. "There's another possibility. What if Emeka drugged you himself? What if he let someone assault you while you were unconscious, maybe as part of some deal or blackmail scheme? And then when you got pregnant, he realized he couldn't let you give birth to another man's child without destroying his reputation." The room tilted. That's too evil. Even for Emeka." "Is it?" Colonel asked quietly. "He pushed his pregnant wife into the ocean. He stole your inheritance. He faked mourning you while marrying your best friend. Adunni, there is no bottom to this man's depravity. I felt sick. Physically, violently sick. I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left. When I emerged, shaking and pale, Connell was on his phone. "I'm calling in a favor," he said. "I know a private investigator who specializes in cases like this. If there's any evidence from that night, hotel records, witness statements, anything, she'll find it." "How long will it take?" "I don't know. But we're running out of time. The paternity test results will be public in a week. Once that happens, Emika's lawyers will go on the attack. We need to be ready with the full story, not just pieces of it." That night, after Connell left, I stood in Kayamika's doorway watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, completely unaware that her entire existence was at the center of a legal and moral hurricane. She was mine. No matter who her biological father was, no matter how she'd been conceived, she was mine. I'd carried her, birthed her, raised her, loved her. Nothing would change that. But I needed to know the truth. Not just for the trial, but for her. One day, she'd be old enough to ask questions, and I needed to have answers. My phone buzzed with a text from another unknown number. "You're getting too close to the truth. Stop now, or your daughter pays the price." My blood turned to ice. I immediately called Connell. "Someone just threatened Kayamika. Forward me the message. I'm calling the police right now." "No. If we involve the police, whoever sent this might panic and act. I need to handle this differently." "Adunni, you can't. I'm hiring private security. Tonight. And I'm moving Kayamika somewhere safe until this is over." "Where?" I thought of the one person who'd already proven she was willing to risk everything for the truth. Ngozi. Emika's mother. She has a house in Abuja with security, and she owes me. She'll protect Kayamika while I figure out who's behind these threats. "Are you sure you can trust her?" "I don't have a choice," I said. "Someone knows I'm digging into what happened at that gala, and they're desperate enough to threaten my child. Until I know who and why, Kayamika needs to be as far from Lagos, and from me, as possible." This story just went from revenge drama to full-blown conspiracy. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, hit that like button and tell us in the comments, who do you think is threatening Adunni? And who is Kayamika's real father? Subscribe and turn on notifications because this chapter is going to explode with revelations you won't believe. Drop your theories below. The drive to Abuja took 8 hours, but I didn't trust putting Kayamika on a plane where passenger lists could be tracked. We left Lagos at 3 in the morning, before the city woke up, and I spent the entire journey checking my rearview mirror for cars that might be following us. Kayamika slept in her car seat for most of the trip, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Every time I looked at her peaceful face, my resolve hardened. Whoever was threatening us would regret it. I'd survived drowning, survived poverty, survived rebuilding my entire life from nothing. I could survive this too. Ngozi's house in Maitama was a fortress. High walls, security cameras, armed guards at the gate. When we arrived just after noon, she was waiting at the front door, her face drawn with worry. "Thank you for this," I said as I carried Kayamika inside. My daughter was awake now but groggy, confused about where we were. "You don't need to thank me," Ngozi said, leading us to a spacious guest room on the second floor. "After everything my son did to you, this is the least I can do. She'll be safe here. I promise you that." "The threats." "I know." Connell called me. "I've already doubled the security and informed the guards that no one gets in or out without my personal authorization. Not even family." I knelt down to Kayamika's level, brushing her curls from her face. "Baby girl, you're going to stay here with Grandma Ngozi for a little while, okay? Mama has to go back to Lagos to work, but I'll call you every day." "Why can't I come with you?" Her lower lip trembled. "Because Mama needs you to be safe, and this is the safest place I know. Grandma Ngozi is going to take very good care of you. And when I'm done with my work, I'll come back and get you." I promise. Do you promise? With your whole heart. With my whole heart, I said, pulling her into a tight hug. I love you more than anything in this world. Never forget that. Ngozi's eyes were wet when I stood up. I'll guard her with my life, Adunni. You have my word. I believed her. Whatever Emeka had become, his mother was still a woman of integrity. She'd proven that when she testified against her own son. Back in Lagos by midnight, I went straight to my apartment and found Kunal waiting outside with a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her 40s, dressed in jeans and a leather jacket, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalogue everything about me in seconds. Adunni, this is Kemi Adel-Eek, Kunal said. The private investigator I told you about. We shook hands. Kemi's grip was firm, confident. I've been going through the hotel records from the Eco Hotel for the night of the charity gala, Kemi said as we settled into my living room. She pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through documents. The security footage was wiped after 30 days, as per hotel policy. But I found something interesting in the guest registry. She turned the tablet toward me. This is the list of suite rentals for that night. Most were conference attendees or wedding guests. But one suite, number 2047, was rented under a shell company called Meridian Holdings. I don't recognize that name, I said. You wouldn't. It's a front. But when I traced the ownership, it leads back to a businessman named Obinna Okafor. Does that name mean anything to you? My blood went cold. Yes. He was Emeka's business partner. They co-owned several properties together. Kemi nodded grimly. And according to hotel records, the keycard for Suite 2047 was used 17 times that night. That's unusual for a single guest. It suggests multiple people were coming and going. What are you saying? I'm saying that suite might have been used for something other than sleeping. And if Obinna Okafor rented it, and Emeka was his partner, then they were likely both involved in whatever happened there. Kunal leaned forward. We need to talk to Okafor. Find out what he knows. He won't talk voluntarily, Kemi said. Men like him don't. But I have a contact in the hotel's former security staff who might be willing to share what he remembers from that night. For a price. How much? I asked. 200,000 naira. I didn't hesitate. Pay it. I need answers. 2 days later, Kemi returned with news. We met at a small cafe in Ikeja, away from prying eyes and listening ears. Kemi slid a folder across the table to me. The security guard's name is Tund. He worked at the Eco Hotel for 15 years before he was let go in 2021. He remembers that night very clearly because he was told to ignore certain activities on the 21st floor, where Suite 2047 was located. Told by who? The hotel manager at the time, who has since moved to Dubai. But Tun says there were explicit instructions that whatever happened in that suite was not to be logged, recorded, or reported. He was paid 50,000 naira in cash to look the other way. My hands clenched into fists. What did he see? He saw several prominent men entering and leaving the suite throughout the night. He recognized a few faces, politicians, businessmen, people he'd seen in the society pages. But he was told to forget what he saw. Did he see me? Kemi's expression softened. He saw a woman matching your description being carried into the suite by 2 men around 11 p.m. You appeared unconscious. He saw the same woman being carried out around 3 a.m. and placed in a car that drove away. The cafe spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. He's willing to testify? Kunal asked. For the right price and protection, yes. He's scared. He knows the kind of men we're dealing with. But he says he's been carrying this guilt for 4 years, and he wants to do the right thing. We'll protect him, I said, my voice hard. And we'll make sure everyone involved pays for what they did. There's more, Kemi said quietly. She pulled out another document. I traced Obinna Okafor's financial records from that time period. 3 days after the gala, he made a payment of 5 million naira to a medical clinic in Victoria Island. The clinic specializes in genetic testing and paternity verification. Understanding crashed over me like a wave. They planned it. They drugged me, I couldn't finish the sentence. They assaulted me, and then they had my DNA tested to make sure I was pregnant. But why? Kunal asked. What would they gain from that? Blackmail, Kemi said. Think about it. If they could prove that Adunni was pregnant with another man's child, they could use that information to control her, to extort money from her family, or to manipulate Emeka. Or, I said slowly, horror dawning, they could use it to give Emeka a reason to kill me that wouldn't look like cold-blooded murder. Crime of passion. Temporary insanity. A husband who discovered his wife's infidelity and snapped. The three of us sat in silence, the full scope of the conspiracy settling over us like a shroud. We need to find out who else was involved, I said finally. Who were the other men in that suite? And who orchestrated this entire thing? I'm working on it, Kemi said. But these are powerful people. They've spent 4 years covering their tracks. It won't be easy. I don't care how hard it is, I said. I want names. I want evidence. And I want justice. That night, I called Kayamaka to say goodnight. She was happy, telling me about the games Ngozi had taught her and the big garden with flowers she'd never seen before. When are you coming to get me, Mama? Soon, baby. Very soon. After we hung up, I sat alone in my apartment and let myself cry for the first time since this all began. Not for myself. I'd cried enough tears over the past 4 years. But for the woman I used to be, the one who'd walked into that gala trusting everyone around her, believing the world was fundamentally good. That woman had died that night, even if her body had survived the ocean. The woman I was now was harder, sharper, forged in betrayal and violence. And she would burn down everyone responsible for what had been taken from her. The next morning, I woke to my phone ringing. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Okonkwo. The voice was male, cultured, vaguely familiar. My name is Obinna Okafor. I believe you've been asking questions about me. My heart hammered against my ribs. How did you get this number? That's not important. What is important is that we talk. Face to face. Today. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do. Especially if you want to know the truth about what happened that night. About who your daughter's father really is. The line went dead before I could respond. I immediately called Kemi and Kunal, my hands shaking. It's a trap, Kunal said immediately. You can't meet with him alone. He has information I need. Or he wants to silence you permanently, Kemi countered. These people have already proven they're willing to kill. Don't make yourself an easy target. But I'd already made up my mind. Set up the meeting in a public place. Somewhere crowded. And have backup nearby in case things go wrong. But I'm going. This ends now. We arranged to meet at the Federal Palace Hotel in Victoria Island at 2 p.m. in the lobby restaurant where there would be dozens of witnesses. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a small recording device hidden under my blouse. Kemi was positioned at a nearby table, and Kunal was in a car outside, ready to call the police if I signaled trouble. At exactly 2 p.m., Obinna Okafor walked through the entrance. He was in his 50s, tall and distinguished, wearing an expensive suit and an even more expensive watch. The kind of man who expected doors to open for him and rarely heard the word no. He sat down across from me without asking permission. Mrs. Okonkwo. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries, I said coldly. You said you know what happened that night. Start talking. Obinna smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You were collateral damage in a much larger game. That's the truth. Nothing personal. Nothing personal? I was drugged and assaulted. Yes. Regrettable. But necessary. The casual way he said it made my skin crawl. Necessary for what? For controlling your husband. Emeka was becoming problematic, you see. He was threatening to pull out of certain business arrangements that were very profitable for a number of powerful people. We needed leverage to keep him in line. So you used me. We used the situation. You were convenient. Young, beautiful, loyal to your husband. Perfect for our purposes. Who else was involved? I demanded. That information stays with me. Then this conversation is over. I started to stand. Sit down, Obinna said, his voice sharp. I'm not finished. There's something you need to understand. If you continue pursuing this case, if you expose what happened that night, you won't just destroy Emeka. You'll bring down some of the most powerful men in Nigeria. Men who will do anything, and I mean anything, to protect themselves. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You think the threats against your daughter are coming from Emeka? He's in jail. He has no power anymore. But the others do. And they're watching you very closely. My blood turned to ice. Who sent those messages? Obinna leaned back in his chair. People who want this buried. People who are willing to make you disappear just like they tried 4 years ago. Only this time they'll make sure the job gets done properly. I'm not afraid of you or anyone else. Then you're a fool. He stood, straightening his jacket. You have 48 hours to drop the charges against Emeka and leave Lagos. Take your daughter and go somewhere far away. Start over. Forget this ever happened. And if I don't? Obinna's smile was cold and empty. Then you'll learn that some truths are more dangerous than lies. And some battles can't be won, no matter how righteous you think you are. He walked away, leaving me sitting alone at the table, my hands shaking with rage and fear. Kemi appeared at my side moments later. Did you get all that? I tapped the recording device under my blouse. Every word. Good. Because we're going to need it. That evening, Kunnel reviewed the recording with a grim expression. This is huge. Conspiracy, obstruction of justice, possibly even human trafficking depending on how we frame the assault. But he's right about one thing. If we pursue this, we're going after people with serious power. People who can make evidence disappear and witnesses recant. So what do you recommend? Kunnel looked at me steadily. I recommend you think very carefully about whether you're willing to risk everything. Your life, your daughter's safety, your future, to see this through. Because once we cross this line, there's no going back. I thought about Kayamaka, safe in Abuja. I thought about the woman I used to be, naive and trusting. I thought about the woman I'd become, tempered by fire and loss. I've already lost everything once, I said. They can't take anything from me that I'm not willing to sacrifice. File the expanded charges. Go after everyone involved. Let's finish this. If you think Adunni should back down to protect herself, or if you think she should fight no matter the cost, drop your opinion in the comments below. This story is about to reach a breaking point, and coming chapter will reveal secrets that will change everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Where are you watching from? Let us know. The expanded charges were filed on a Friday morning, and by Friday afternoon, all hell broke loose. Kunnel's office received threatening phone calls from unlisted numbers. My apartment building's security cameras mysteriously stopped working. Kemi found her car tires slashed when she left her gym. The message was clear: we were being watched, and someone wanted us to know it. But we didn't stop. We couldn't. The paternity test results came back on Monday, delivered in a sealed envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I opened it alone in my apartment, my hands trembling so badly I could barely read the words. The test confirmed what Dr. Musa had told me. Emeka Okonkwo was not Kayamaka's biological father. The document included a partial DNA profile of the actual father, enough to run comparison tests if we ever found a candidate. I stared at those clinical numbers and letters, trying to see my daughter in them, trying to understand how something so violent and wrong had given me the most precious thing in my life. My phone rang. It was Connell. The prosecution received the results too, he said without preamble. Emeka's lawyers are already spinning it to the press. They're painting you as an adulterous wife who got what she deserved. Let them talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We have Obina's recording. We have Tun's testimony. We have evidence of a conspiracy. The judge wants to see us tomorrow morning. Both sides. He's considering whether to allow the new charges or dismiss them as prejudicial to the original case. What are our chances? Connell was quiet for a moment. Honestly, 50-50. If the judge is sympathetic, he'll see this as evidence of a larger criminal enterprise. If he's conservative, he'll say we're trying to turn a murder trial into a fishing expedition. Then we need to make sure he sees it our way. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Kayamika, about the childhood she'd never have, about the questions I'd eventually need to answer. How do you tell a little girl that she was born from violence? That her father, whoever he was, had hurt her mother in the worst way possible? I was still awake at 2 in the morning when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My stomach dropped. Another threat? But when I opened it, the message read simply, I know who you're looking for. Meet me at the National Museum tomorrow at noon. Come alone. I'll be by the bronze sculptures. I stared at the message, my mind racing. It could be a trap. It probably was a trap. But what if it wasn't? What if someone genuinely wanted to help? I forwarded the message to Kemi and typed, "What do you think?" Her response came within seconds. Absolutely not. Too dangerous. But by morning, I'd made up my decision. I was going. The National Museum in Onneken was crowded with school groups and tourists when I arrived at 11:45. I'd told Kemi where I was going despite her objections, and she'd insisted on positioning herself nearby with backup. I wore jeans and a simple blouse, trying to blend in with the other visitors. At exactly noon, I stood in front of the Benin bronzes, pretending to study the intricate metalwork while my heart hammered in my chest. Mrs. Okonkwo. I turned to find a woman standing beside me. She was probably in her early 30s, well-dressed in business casual attire, with an intelligent face and worried eyes. Who are you? I asked quietly. My name is Amoka. I worked as an executive assistant at Okafor Enterprises 4 years ago. I was at the charity gala the night you were drugged. My pulse quickened. What did you see? Amoka glanced around nervously, making sure no one was listening. I saw everything. I was working the event, coordinating with the hotel staff, managing the guest list. When you started feeling ill, I saw Mr. Okafor tell your husband to take you upstairs. I thought it was strange because Mr. Okafor seemed very insistent about which suite you should rest in. Suite 2047. Yes. How did you know? I have investigators. What else did you see? Amoka's voice dropped even lower. About an hour later, I was delivering some documents to Mr. Okafor's office suite on the same floor. The door to 2047 was partially open, and I heard voices inside. Male voices. Laughing. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. She paused, her face pale with the memory. What did you see? I pressed. I saw you unconscious on the bed. And I saw 3 men in the room with you. One of them was Mr. Okafor. I didn't recognize the other 2, but they were clearly wealthy, powerful men. They were talking about business deals, about leverage, about controlling your husband. And then one of them said something that made my blood run cold. What did he say? Amoka's eyes filled with tears. He said, "This should keep Emeka in line for a long time. A bastard child is worth more than any contract." And then they all laughed. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. They'd done this deliberately, coldly, as a business strategy. I wasn't a person to them. I was a tool. Why didn't you report this? I asked, fighting to keep my voice level. I tried. I went to the police the next day. But before I could file an official report, I was called into Mr. Okafor's office. He told me very calmly that if I said anything to anyone about what I'd seen, my younger brother would have an accident. My brother was 16 at the time, Mrs. Okonkwo. He was all I had left after our parents died. So I kept quiet. And now my brother is in university in London, safe and far away. And I can't live with this guilt anymore. You deserve to know the truth. You deserve justice. I reached out and squeezed her hand. Thank you. This took courage. There's more, Amoka said. I made copies of Mr. Okafor's schedule from that night, including the guest list for Suite 2047. I've kept them hidden all these years, waiting for the right moment. I think this is it. She pulled a flash drive from her purse and pressed it into my hand. Everything is on here. Names, times, financial transactions from that period. It's not complete, but it should be enough to start connecting the dots. Will you testify? Amoka hesitated, fear flickering across her face. If you can guarantee my safety and my brother's, yes. I'll testify to everything I saw. I promise you'll be protected. My investigator has connections. We'll make sure you're safe. Amoka nodded, then glanced at her watch. I have to go. I've already stayed too long. Be careful, Mrs. Okonkwo. These men are dangerous, and they have resources you can't imagine. She disappeared into the crowd before I could say anything else. I clutched the flash drive in my pocket and pulled out my phone to call Kemi. But before I could dial, a man's voice spoke from behind me. That was a touching conversation. I spun around to find a stranger standing there. He was in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of cold amusement. Who are you? Someone who's been watching you very closely. Someone who's disappointed that you didn't take Mr. Okafor's advice to leave Lagos. My hand tightened around my phone. I'm not going anywhere. That's unfortunate. For you and for your daughter. The threat was clear. I looked around frantically for Kemi, for museum security, for anyone who could help. But we were in a relatively quiet corner of the museum, and the stranger had positioned himself between me and the exit. If you touch my daughter, we won't touch her, he interrupted smoothly. We won't have to. There are so many ways to destroy a person without physical violence. Legal troubles, financial ruin, social disgrace. We could make sure you lose custody of your child. We could make sure every door in this country closes in your face. We could make you wish you'd actually drowned 4 years ago. I'm not afraid of you. He smiled. Yes, you are. You're terrified. I can see it in your eyes. But you're also stubborn, which is why I'm here to offer you one final chance. Drop the expanded charges. Testify against Emeka for the original attempted murder charge if you want. We don't care about him anymore. But leave the rest of us out of it. And if I refuse, then we'll make sure the trial becomes about you. About your questionable past. About inconsistencies in your story. We'll find every skeleton in your closet and parade them in front of the media. By the time we're done, no one will believe a word you say. He stepped closer, and I forced myself not to flinch. You're not the hero of this story, Mrs. Okonkwo. You're just a woman who survived something terrible and foolishly thinks she can take on an entire system. But systems don't lose. They adapt. They absorb. They crush anyone who threatens them. Is that what happened to my father? I asked suddenly. Did your system kill him too? Something flickered in the stranger's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Your father was a smart man. He knew when to fight and when to walk away. Unfortunately, he chose to fight. And you see how that turned out. Before I could respond, Kemi appeared out of nowhere, her phone held up and recording. I've got everything you just said on video. Keep talking. Please. The stranger's expression didn't change, but I saw calculation in his eyes. He was weighing his options, trying to decide if the threat of exposure outweighed the benefit of silencing me. Finally, he stepped back. "This isn't over." "No," I agreed. "It's not. But when it is, you're going to prison along with everyone else involved." He walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd with practiced ease. Kemi grabbed my arm. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine. Did you get everything?" "Every word." And I got photos of his face. "We can run facial recognition, find out who he is." I pulled out the flash drive Amoka had given me. "We need to look at this immediately. It might have the answers we've been looking for." Back at Kemi's office, we plugged the flash drive into her computer and watched as files began to load. There were spreadsheets, scanned documents, photographs, and what looked like security footage. "This is incredible," Kemi breathed, scrolling through the files. She documented everything. Guest lists, financial transfers, communications between Okafor and other conspirators. "This is enough to bring down a dozen powerful men." Cunnell, who'd rushed over as soon as we called him, leaned over the computer screen. "Do we have names?" "We have 3 confirmed names beyond Okafor," Kemi said, pulling up a document. "Senator Ibrahim Musa, Chief Adebayo Williams, and Dr. Ifeanyi Nwosu." My breath caught. Dr. Nwosu? The medical director of Victoria Island Women's Clinic. The same. According to these records, he was paid to perform genetic testing on you without your knowledge or consent. He's the one who confirmed you were pregnant and identified the biological father. Can we prove all this? With Amoka's testimony and these documents? Yes. It won't be easy, but yes. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over Lagos. The city sprawled before me, glittering and corrupt and full of secrets. Somewhere in that maze of buildings and people were the men who destroyed my life. But now I knew their names. Now I could fight back. "File charges against all of them," I said. "Conspiracy, assault, obstruction of justice, whatever we can make stick. And leak the names to the press. Let public opinion do what the courts are too slow to do." Cunnell looked uncomfortable. "Adunni, if we do this, there's no turning back. These are powerful men with powerful friends. They will come after you with everything they have." I turned to face him, and I could see in his expression that he understood. I'd already made my choice. I'd made it 4 years ago when I dragged myself out of the Atlantic Ocean. I'd made it every day since when I'd fought to survive and raise my daughter and rebuild my shattered life. "Let them come," I said. "I'm ready." What would you do if you were Adunni? Would you back down to protect yourself, or would you risk everything for justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you're Team Adunni, and don't forget to subscribe because next chapter is going to be intense. This fight is just getting started. What do you think happens next? Comment below. The news broke at 6 a.m. on Tuesday morning, and within hours, Lagos was on fire with the scandal. Every major newspaper carried the story on their front pages. Every television station led with it. Social media exploded with hashtags demanding justice. The names I'd released, Senator Ibrahim Musa, Chief Adebayo Williams, Dr. Ifeanyi Nwosu, and Obinna Okafor, were suddenly household names for all the wrong reasons. The public outcry was immediate and deafening. Women's rights groups organized protests outside the National Assembly. Civil society organizations demanded investigations. International media picked up the story, and suddenly Nigeria's elite were being scrutinized by the entire world. But the conspirators didn't go quietly. Their lawyers released statements denying everything. They called me a liar, a blackmailer, a woman scorned who was trying to destroy innocent men. They claimed the evidence was fabricated, that Amoka was a disgruntled former employee seeking revenge, that the entire case was a conspiracy against successful Nigerian businessmen. The court of public opinion, however, wasn't buying it. Too many people had experienced corruption and abuse of power in Nigeria. Too many women had suffered in silence while powerful men acted with impunity. My story became a symbol for everyone who'd ever been victimized by the system and told to stay quiet. The trial date was moved up by 2 weeks. The judge, perhaps sensing the political pressure or perhaps genuinely outraged by what he'd read, declared that justice delayed was justice denied. Emeka's trial began on a Monday morning in a Lagos High Court packed with journalists, activists, and curious spectators who'd camped outside overnight to get seats. I sat in the front row with Kunnel beside me, dressed in a simple navy dress that made me look professional and sympathetic. Across the aisle, Emeka sat with his lawyers, looking thinner than I remembered, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame. He wouldn't look at me. Zainab was being tried separately, having refused the plea deal after I'd blocked it. She sat in the courtroom too, her eyes red from crying, a shadow of the confident woman who'd once been my best friend. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The boat captain testified about being paid to look the other way. The forensic accountant showed how Emeka had systematically stolen from my father's estate. Medical experts testified about my injuries from the drowning. But it was Ngozi's testimony that broke the courtroom's heart. She took the stand wearing all black, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. She told the court about Emeka's confession, about how she'd helped cover it up, about the guilt that had consumed her for 4 years. "I failed as a mother," she said, looking directly at her son. "I taught you right from wrong, but when you chose wrong, I enabled you instead of holding you accountable. That is my shame to carry. But you, Emeka, you made the choice to commit murder. You chose greed over love, money over morality, and you must face the consequences of that choice." Emeka's face crumbled. He wept openly in the courtroom, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, nothing but a cold certainty that justice was finally being served. The second week of the trial focused on the conspiracy charges. Amoka testified about what she'd seen at the hotel, her voice shaking but clear. She identified Obinna Okafor and the other men who'd been in the suite that night. She presented the documents she'd kept hidden for 4 years. Tund, the security guard, corroborated her story. He described being paid to ignore what happened on the 21st floor, described seeing me carried in and out of the suite unconscious. Dr. Nwosu was arrested trying to flee the country. When confronted with the evidence, he broke down and confessed to performing unauthorized genetic testing and sharing the results with Okafor. One by one, the conspirators' alibis fell apart. Senator Musa resigned from his position, claiming health issues. Chief Williams was suspended from his company's board pending investigation. Obinna Okafor was denied bail after the prosecution argued he was a flight risk. But it was the testimony about my assault that silenced the courtroom completely. The medical examiner who'd treated me in Badagry took the stand and described my injuries in clinical detail. The trauma specialist explained what happens to assault survivors, how they cope with violation and trauma. A psychologist testified about my PTSD symptoms and how I'd fought to rebuild my life while carrying that burden. I didn't testify. Kunnel advised against it, saying the defense would try to tear me apart on cross-examination. But I submitted a victim impact statement that was read aloud by the prosecutor. In it, I described the woman I used to be, trusting, loving, full of hope. I described waking up in the hospital, broken and alone, with no memory of what had been done to me. I described learning the truth, piece by piece, and feeling my faith in humanity shatter with each revelation. But I also described my daughter, the light of my life, the reason I'd survived, the proof that something beautiful could emerge from something horrible. She is innocent, I wrote. Whatever sins were committed by her biological father, whatever evil brought her into this world, she is innocent and loved. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows that her existence matters, that she is wanted, that she is enough. By the time the prosecutor finished reading, half the courtroom was in tears. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Emeka was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Zainab received 15 years. Obinna Okafor got 30 years. The others received sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years, depending on their level of involvement. The judge's words rang through the courtroom like thunder. This court finds that the defendants engaged in a systematic campaign of violence, manipulation, and abuse against Mrs. Adunni Okonkwo. They treated her not as a human being but as a disposable tool to be used and discarded. Their actions represent the worst of what happens when power is unchecked and corruption is tolerated. This court hopes that these sentences send a clear message. No one is above the law in Nigeria. No amount of wealth or influence can protect you from the consequences of your crimes. I sat perfectly still as the sentences were read, Kunnal's hand on my shoulder. I waited for the rush of triumph, for the satisfaction of revenge finally achieved. But all I felt was tired. After the trial, I drove to Abuja to collect Kayamaka. She ran into my arms the moment she saw me, and I held her tight enough that she squeaked in protest. "Mama, I missed you so much." "I missed you too, baby girl. So much." Ngozi stood in the doorway, watching us with sad, loving eyes. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "My father's estate is being restored to me. I have more money than I know what to do with. But I think I need to leave Lagos for a while. Start fresh somewhere new. Will you let me stay in Kayamaka's life? I know I have no right to ask, but she's my granddaughter, and I love her." I looked at the woman who'd betrayed her own son for the sake of truth, who'd chosen justice over blood, who'd protected my daughter when I couldn't. "Yes," I said. "You'll always be part of our family." 6 months later, Kayamaka and I moved to a small house in Ibadan, away from the chaos and media attention of Lagos. I started a foundation for assault survivors, using my father's money to help other women rebuild their lives. I didn't date. I didn't trust easily. But I was healing, slowly, one day at a time. Kayamaka thrived. She made friends, started school, laughed more than I'd ever heard her laugh. She asked about her father sometimes, and I told her age-appropriate truths, that some people make bad choices, that family is defined by love rather than biology, that she was wanted and cherished beyond measure. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me with those serious eyes. "Mama, are the bad men gone now?" "Yes, baby. They're gone." "Good. Now we can be happy." I kissed her forehead and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. Now we can be happy." And for the first time in 4 years, I believed it might actually be true. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to Stories by Tino for more powerful stories like this one. Drop a comment telling us where you watched from and what you thought of Adunni's journey. Remember, justice may be delayed, but it's never denied. Until next time, stay strong and never give up fighting for what's right.